Hey everyone, this is Jens Anso. Welcome back to the channel. This episode is a debrief from the New York Custom Knife Show and my trip to New York.
All right, Jens.
Alrighty.
Welcome back from New York.
Thank you very much.
How did it go?
The trip was so great. This was my first trip back to New York in a couple of years, but my first knife show in the US since June 2019. Damn. So it was with a lot of anticipation, and I really look forward both to the knife show and just to being in New York itself as well.
So you made the point about it's the first time in 3 years, 3 or 4 years you've been to New York?
Almost 4 years, yeah.
Was that because of COVID?
Yeah, the first few years was obviously due to COVID and international travel restrictions. The shows were there to some point. The New York Custom Show hasn't been in New York since 18, I think. Then they changed location to Nashville for a couple of years. And now they reintroduced the show in New York. Usually it's November, and this time it was in late February. For me, the New York Custom Show has always been my favorite show, both because it's very different vibe and size from, for instance, the Blade Show that I've been going to for 15 years now, which is huge. The New York show is maybe 15th of a size, so about between 70 and 100 exhibitors, but very nice, small, cozy show, which I've always enjoyed. And it's in New York, which is one of my favorite cities to visit.
Why is that?
The whole atmosphere of Manhattan, the vibe, the energy is something that has always inspired me tremendously. I love that the city is always alive. I love the restaurants. I love the feel of walking around Manhattan. It's just a wonderful place to be. It's also a wonderful place to leave.
Oh, right.
When you, like me, live in the countryside, it's very quiet where I live. You can't hear it, but the window is open right now.
Yeah.
You can't have that in New York and actually shoot a video.
I envy you.
Unless you're Casey Neistat, and that's part of your thing, of course.
Absolutely.
But it's always inspired me to be in New York, Manhattan specifically, and I always have this strange feeling that when I'm there, I want to go back home. And not because I'm tired of being there, but because I get so inspired that it always inspired me to rearrange the whole workshop or build some furniture, or I sketch a new knife design and I want to get back and work on it right away. So I always have that feeling when I'm there. New York is one of those cities where at some point I would love to live there for a year, just to get the deeper experience of the city.
It's a tough city.
It's a tough city, but I simply love it.
So before we talk more about the knife show, did you get a chance to get the Leica out?
Oh yes. So I landed Thursday afternoon and started immediately just walking around. I'm not quite sure why, probably because it's been so long since I've been in the city, but I stayed around 29th Street, which isn't my favorite part of town. So when I started walking out the door and walking around the neighborhood, I was tired, I was hungry, and feeling almost slightly depressed, which confused me a lot because I've been looking forward to this trip for months. I booked the tickets several months ago, and I planned to go here for many months. So actually acknowledging that feeling was strange for me, because what is this? And I think it was a combination of me being super hungry and tired, being in the not so inspiring neighborhood, and everything combined. So what I did was I put my earpods on, put some nice music on, and then I started walking south into the village and NoHo and Soho, which is my favorite parts of town. It's those areas are so inspiring to me. The rest of Manhattan is as well when it's at the right time. But my mood instantly changed the moment that I put music in my ears, and I actually kept the music running in my ears for the entire trip while I was walking. So yeah, I did get the Leica out. I shot a ton of pictures, and I'm not a great photographer at all, and I think I have an eye for the motif, but the technicality behind using a camera, I'm not all that good. So I always shoot on auto, which is, yeah, I know. But this time actually with the Leica, I started using it manually a little bit, which was really nice, and something I will definitely dwell into. It's interesting that I often find that in Denmark, people are a lot more private. Maybe when you get to know people, you open up, but in New York, you can strike up a conversation with everybody. And 20 minutes later, you know a lot about a complete stranger's life, and I love that. So I always spend time talking with people as well.
I know you're not supposed to, but eavesdropping on another conversation in a bar while you're sitting with a cocktail or a cup of coffee.
In the past, I've been a very private guy and quiet guy. And I would say after meeting my wife, Karina, she has trained me a little to actually open up.
Right.
She called me the quiet Northern Jutlandic. I don't even know how to say that. But in where I grew up, you wouldn't talk so much.
Right.
Talk is overrated. But I actually enjoy talking with people. So when I accidentally hear a conversation, I can't help but sometimes. But have you considered? I do that.
That's so you.
I love that, because then suddenly you strike up a conversation with the couple next to you.
Right.
I love that. So not on this trip, but on my previous trip to the US, where I was in Seattle area, and I drove to the mountains and stayed at a lodge there. I spent an entire evening talking with two elderly couple and learned about their life and how one of the guys were in the mining industry for 50 years and how they met and how the other couple met and traveled in South Africa, and just getting a chance to just get a small window into somebody else's life. I love that.
It was the first knife show in a couple of years. How did it go?
It went really well. For me, one of the main reasons to prepare for and go to a knife show has always been to meet up with customers and fans and new potential customers and meet the people. And there was no shortage of that at this show. It was wonderful. And one of the things about going to different shows across the country is that at each show you usually have some people who only go to that show. So I met a ton of friends who I only see in New York. So it's been, 4 years since I saw these guys. So that's always great. The show itself was a little different for me this time because it was the first time in more than a decade that I didn't sell by the lottery method.
Oh yeah, you spoke about the lottery method.
So just to explain what that is, my first time at the New York Custom Show, which I would guess is 15 years ago, I was a little stressed setting up at the show and preparing everything. So I had my head into my bag and I was putting knives on the table. And I got up and all the knives were gone. People were standing in a pile, knife in one hand and cash in the other. And it was like, oh, and that was a little unprepared for me. So, but I ended up selling everything within the first 5 minutes of setting up, or I didn't even get a chance to set up, which from a business standpoint was awesome.
That's great.
That was a great start for that show. But it was Friday morning and it was a 3-day show back then. So I was standing behind my table for 3 days without having anything to show, which when you look past the success was a little weird. So like many other makers in the knife making community, I started selling by lottery, where I would bring, say, 10 knives, and behind each knife I would have an envelope or a box, and people could put their name and phone number in. And you would draw a name, and that person got a chance to buy the knife.
That's the same for sneaker shopping.
Yeah, I hear that. And that worked out great, because then you could actually have knives on the table both Friday and Saturday. You could reserve part of the knives that I prepared for the next day. So I would have knives on the table, and say the lottery would be at 2 p.m. Then you had knives on the table most of the day that you could talk about. It's been a concept that has been developed over time. I think to begin with, you would draw cards from a deck of cards and then tear it in half. And then you would draw a half.
Oh, right.
That required that the lottery attendants all were present at the lottery,
right,
which would create a huge pile of people in front of your table, and the knife maker across the aisle would have a bunch of asses in their face instead,
right,
which was not ideal, especially as the lotteries grew, both the amount of people entering the lotteries, but also the amount of makers having lotteries. So then my friend Lucas Burnley came up with a concept of, he called it beep beep lottery. And I adapted that. So you would put your name and number on a note, put it in a bag, and I would draw a name. I would send a text or call the guy, so they didn't have to be present at the table. Super concept. It made it possible for me to actually have a conversation with the guy buying the knife.
Right.
Whereas the big pile lottery wasn't possible to have time to talk with everybody, because you sold everything within 10 minutes.
And also chaotic, right?
Very chaotic. And then over the years, I think the lottery and the vibe of the shows also, it's a little hard for me to describe. It's a little diffuse, but I think everybody was having a lottery. And if everybody is having a lottery, it starts to lose its meaning.
Right.
So this year...
It's also a great way to get hype, but I mean, it ruins the whole experience, right?
It was a great way to get hype. And I think that when you win a lottery as a customer, that's such a great experience. A very good friend and customer I met at the show again, and we went out and had dinner, and he told me that he didn't know custom knives at all, but he was somewhat fascinated by some of my designs, and then he entered my lottery and won. And he would say, well, it was on Saturday, it was at the Blade Show in 2017 or 18, and it was a Neo, and it was that specific model. And he was jumping around like a ball because he won. And I say, he won the lottery. He still had to pay for the knife.
Oh, well, yeah, obviously.
Just a quick side note to that. Every single year or every single show I had a lottery, people have entered thinking it's a chance to win a free knife, which...
Come on, man.
No, but it's true. You call somebody up and say, well, I just picked your name in the lottery, and they come come to my table all excited and said, yeah, what did I win? Well, you won a chance to buy this knife. What? It's $1,800. What? I think must be some mistake here. every single show there was a person or sometimes a couple who entered the lottery who didn't fully understand the concept. Anyways, because of COVID and I couldn't go to shows, I started my Launch 15 online knife show, and I still do that every month on the 15th. I sell knives and gear at a specific time, and it's always been first come, first serve, and I actually enjoy that.
Right.
You have to put in some effort to buy one of my knives. So I figured, let's try that at the New York Custom Knife Show. So the show opens at 9 for VIP and at 11 for general admission. So at 11:30, just to give everyone a chance to see what I brought, I had my sales start with first come, first serve. So at around 10:30, people starting to see, is there a line forming, and people starting arriving. And in the end, there is a couple of guys standing there for 45 minutes or so waiting first in line or second in line. So, and that allowed me to actually have a lengthy conversation with these guys, which was wonderful. And they got to buy the knife that they wanted. So,
did they know about you before, or was it?
These guys, yeah. But I also sold knives to people who didn't know who I was, but went by the table and saw what I had on display and bought a knife, it's always great. So within the first, I would say 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I sold the majority of what I had on the table, but still had a few knives. And I brought some of my puzzle pieces, I bought some vessels, and I had some Astra knives as well.
You had some Monte Carlo and casinos also?
I had 2 casinos and a Monte Carlo, yeah. And in the end, I sold everything but one of the zeros.
What happened to that zero?
So that was the most pricey one in the batch, and I figured rather than bringing it back home and putting it up for sale, I wrote one of my customers who showed interest before the show in the zero and asked if he was interested. So that was sold that same afternoon as well.
Wow.
So yeah, huge success.
So were you nervous before this knife show?
I'm nervous at every single knife show. It's. I think I could compare it to an actor going on stage somewhat. You know that you're prepared, you know your stuff, but there's always this variable of the audience.
Right.
How will they receive tonight's play?
Right.
And for me, how will they receive what I prepared for this show? Will my day of success be over? I don't think that. I don't have doubt in my abilities, but I always have a slight, just a little bit of doubt that is what I'm doing worth people's attention.
It's healthy. I think that's healthy.
I think it's healthy. It somewhat helps me staying humble. I have the same, I wouldn't call it anxiety, but I have this slight nervous thought each month at my Launch 15. It's different because it's online and you get exposed to so many more people online. But at a knife show, it's you and you're there. And the show itself can have a big effect on how successful your show will be. Just the location of your table in the room will dictate if your table is the first that people go to or the last. But I think it's super healthy for me to have that just a slight level of insecurity about my work that allows me to do my best at every single day.
So it seems like New York was a success and you had a great trip. But I sat at home looking at your Instagram stories and was very annoyed that I wasn't in New York. And when I saw some of the things from the New York Knife Show, I was wondering, after COVID, after like a crazy few years, where is the knife community today?
I think the knife community has changed enormously, not just because of COVID, or maybe not even so much because of COVID, but also just the whole transition of how we communicate and how we interact. So when I started out 20 some years ago, it was very much forum based, and you sort of knew everybody. You interacted a lot with each other, and the forums kind of kept like-minded people in the same sphere. Whereas with social media, that has changed somewhat to be very much individually based. So one thing that I noticed at the show was that 80% of the people with the table, I had absolutely no idea who was.
So the different knife makers, you didn't know who they were?
Yeah, I had no idea who they were. But I think that has some to do with social media, that everything is spread out a lot, but also that the journey from being an aspiring knife maker to being at a level where you feel that you should be at a knife show, it's much shorter now than it used to be, probably due to YouTube videos, instructables, stuff like that. But I also think that a knife maker's career can be much shorter now because of social media, that you can have a spike of success and then people will forget about you because social media is like that. If you're not relevant on a daily basis, or you stay very focused on communicating, then I think the ladder to success is shorter, but the slide to oblivion is much shorter.
The slide to oblivion.
So, but it's so strange because I feel that when I go to one of the bigger knife shows, I still see the quotation mark old timers that were around when I started out as a full-time maker. Mm-hmm. I still meet and talk with guys well up in their 70s, some are closer to 80, who are still super relevant. But also a lot of these guys, they just keep on making and they keep on doing what they have done for the past 40 years and it works for them. But the thing is, when they started out, knife shows were the only way of selling knives. And then you would hand out business cards. And those business cards would generate business for the next year. Maybe they would put an ad in a knife magazine and that would give them some business. But now with social media being so easily available, you can start out on a Monday and sell product on a Friday, right, immediately, right, and have success like instantly if you're creative and you're skilled. So the knife community is an ever evolving thing, and I really enjoy that. But it also forces me to be super creative to stay relevant, and I find that super interesting, and that's what keeps my inspiration fueled as well.
All right, Jens, this was super exciting. Maybe next time you'll bring me and my camera to New York.
I will definitely consider it. No.
All right.
Thank you so much for watching. This was my trip to New York, and I'm back home in Denmark, and I can't wait to get out there again. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, write a comment, and hit like. And I'll see you next time. Thanks so much.